So today we're going to look at the lesson plan template for the lesson you will be teaching in this class. And it might look different than ones you've seen before, so let's walk through it a little bit. I will post this annotated version, as you can see here, on Blackboard so you can refer back to this particular one. So at the top you will just put your information, name of the teacher, your name, the school, the subject, the class, etc. And then thinking about the theme, is this a standalone lesson or where does it fall in terms of the theme? In this case, this lesson will be part of a theme related to learning and nutrition and the brain, so it's a combined science-English block. And since I'm the English teacher part of the block, I would put the ELA standards, in this case, the Common Core standards, English Language Arts Common Core standards, so those are there. If you were the science teacher, you would put the next generation standards. And then if you are in a content like PE that doesn't have Common Core standards particularly, you could put your content standards, or if there are standards from English Language Arts that fit, you could use those too. And then for the ELD standards, like in this case, you might do something with collaboration. You can see the link here to take you to the ELD standards. All right, here's my objective. Students will use annotations to identify at least 3 arguments made in the text in the favor of avoiding fast foods. So that's where we're going. Materials include handout from the reading passage taken from the book Fast Food Genocide by Joel Fuhrman, which I don't have on hand or I'd show you. And in terms of technology, they'll be using a Poll Everywhere survey to introduce the content. Okay, so in terms of the background, here I'm going to fill in what have I learned about the class that helped me design this lesson. So I learned that these 8th graders have diverse interests and skills, but most of them are reading at or above grade level. So when I consider the text I'm using, and if we looked at those different ways of measuring text complexity, I could see that the level of the text is a little difficult, but because there are at or above grade level learners, they can handle the text. And also I feel like they will be interested in the text because of that. Like I said, they're already at a high enough reading level to be able to make sense of the text. So I selected a text that I thought would be a little bit difficult because I wanted them to grapple with it a little bit and be challenged with it, because I want them to practice close reading and annotations. So also they're studying and interested in nutrition, and so I picked a text too that was connected to their lesson on health and nutrition, but also would be engaging. So in this part I didn't put the adaptations, but I want you to consider what part of your lesson will be engaging to your language learners and to a student who presents a different instructional challenge. For example, you might have a PowerPoint with vocabulary words to introduce the lesson, or you might give that student that PowerPoint and maybe not give it to the whole class. That could be appropriate for either the language learner or a student has a different instructional challenge. For example, the survey, it might be hard for some kids to look at that and look down and look up and look down, so maybe you give them a handout with all the questions so they can answer it more easily. So those are some of the things you will include in this adaptation section. In the older version of the lesson plan, these were your focus students. So you're just going to put that here. Okay, for the lesson plan itself, activating background. The way I'm going to activate background here is through the survey. So I did a poll everywhere, which will ask them questions about nutrition and how do they notice, or do they feel like nutrition, what they eat, has an impact on their participation and ability to learn in class. So we'll just do what's nice about a poll everywhere is you can see students' responses posted, so then we can just look at those responses together, and they're anonymous because students will use their cell phones to respond. And I guess that also goes into the what have I learned about the class, that they all have cell phones and really like to use them. And it's allowed to be used in the school, which is something you need to make sure of too. Okay, so student activities, they will use the web and their cell phone, post responses to how they feel, and we'll discuss them. Okay, instructional input, I will introduce the annotation bookmark, one that I've shared with you all. And students will read through the text, making annotations, and responding with margin notes. I'm asking them to consider new vocabulary, areas in which they have a strong reaction, either strongly agree or disagree, places that they might have questions about, etc. As they are doing this, I want them to do this independently, and I'm not going to give them lots of upfront because I want them to first work through the text themselves. I'll be walking around to check and see how they're doing, what they're doing, make sure if anybody looks stuck, give them some support. And then I want them to partner up or work in their small groups. And in this class, I think I'll start with partnering and then work in the group of 4. And I want them to first share one question they had or one word they didn't know, and then share something that they felt strongly about. So they're sharing at least 2 things with their partners, and then they'll go to the group and share with the group. And finally, at the end, students are going to write a letter to a friend summarizing the text, identifying the central idea, and 3 reasons why fast foods are not supportive for learning or the brain. And then these will provide me with both an informal and formal assessment. I can look at their annotations for informal responses and, of course, their finished writing piece for a more evaluative assessment. Then at the end here, just do a quick response. Like, for example, this lesson has both behavioristic characteristics and constructivism. And then you can explain that. Talk about social and emotional learning needs. So kids like to do things online. Doing Poll Everywheres is really fun for them, so they enjoy that. Also, they're interested in the topic, and so I think that will be engaging for them. So that those are the kinds of things I might include here, and then they get to work with partners and in groups. Talking about the technology, I just mentioned that, so you could add that here. How will I know if they're actively engaged? Well, I can walk around and see if they're doing the annotations, and of course, I can count how many people responded to the poll. And then you could talk about handing out materials, although I think in this case there wasn't really any, so if it's not appropriate, just put an NA. How did it support their academic language? In this case, using vocabulary that is appropriate to the lesson, and finally, supporting their content knowledge. So in a nutshell, that walks you through this lesson plan. Even though it looks a little more complex, I don't think the content is as different as you would think. But feel free to contact me if you have any questions.